abuse and gender-based violence. Before the break, Joseph had mentioned, he was starting a conversation about how we kind of culturally teach folks in relationships to want folks to fight for you, and how that might be connected to abuse. And I want to let Joseph finish.
Okay, and now this is the thing. There is, in a real sense, a different set of rules that apply to relationships than they are to normal contexts. And I feel this is a very complex point I want to make, because this does not make by any means whatsoever abuse okay. It just says that when people are in a relationship, there is this context in which fighting for them, in other words, where you emotionally reach out to say, no, don't go, or to let them know in a very real way that they're wanted.
Yeah.
But there are cases where this is not done, like this is done because either the person's too insecure or whatnot, or they're leveraging against the other person to feel loved. And this creates a very, very emotionally, like, how do I describe this? The emotions swing very rapidly across the relationship, and people lose control and feel a sense of power very quickly.
Right.
This is not, when it's done, the context in which this is unhealthy. It's not to say that it's unhealthy all the time. There's context in which this is unhealthy. And if you believe that it's normal to have this sort of thing in a relationship, then you may be prone to being put in those contexts more than not.
Right.
Having somebody who is very, very controlling, they will fight for you. They will fight for you because they want that position. They will fight for you. But the problem is that you may not be excluding those people from your filters. Let's say you're interacting with people and you find somebody like that. You might actually find them even more attractive because of that flaw, or because of that character flaw, than because you're aware of what it really means in a relationship. And now this gets in more into the issue of why people who are in abusive relationships usually re-enter abusive relationships, is because they may not be able to identify those characteristics about which they filter other people from. So they may actually only really enjoy or engage in persons who display that extremely dominant position, or perhaps that sense of charm that where they feel these processes being engaged inside them that are direct responses to these emotional manipulations. Now, this is complex because it's not bad to have some of these emotional manipulations. It's just bad when they are removing the power from the person, when they seek to remove that control or power from the person with choice. So it changes it from a negotiation setting to a you must follow what I'm saying, or something will happen, or else. You know, it doesn't matter what the or else is. It really doesn't. It just has to be or else.
Right. So Joseph is speaking a lot about how we're raising folks in relationships to kind of carry out some of these kind of harmful behaviors. And it reminds me immediately of a conversation that I had not too long ago about how we raise young people. That when a young boy hits a young girl, right? Let's say they're in primary school, preschool, sorry. The mother will say, "Oh, the boy must be just like she," right? And we'll just completely dismiss that behavior, even though it's violent and harmful, right? It happens again in primary school, or he must be like the girl. It happens again in early secondary school, or he must be like the girl. But then after he leaves secondary school, let's say he's in university, he's working somewhere, it's suddenly wrong. And he can't process that because every single time that he's exhibited this behavior before, it's been normalized. It's just boys being boys, or he attracted to this girl and doesn't know how to respond. Are we raising abusive young men and subsequently submissive young women? Do we have an answer to that at all? Yeah? Because I mean, I'm gonna be out there and say yes, because it connects to something else that I want to ask about, whether or not corporal punishment is responsible for how we normalize and internalize abuse. Because how we communicate power in our familial spaces, in homes, is, for instance, that if you don't do what I told you to do, right? I as a parent don't have to give you a reason why. I don't have to answer any of your questions. I gave you something to do. If you don't do it, I'm going to cut your tail. Full stop. Right? When young people get older and grow into their own power, especially in a family setting, how they understand, and we spoke about this during the break, how they maintain that power is by exhibiting the same violence that they understand was how they communicate, how their parents communicated power to them.
Right.
So, do we just kind of have a hotbed for abuse education?
I think we do for several reasons. One of them being the gender roles that we have in our society here. And of course, gender inequality and the roles that kind of shape our behavior and shape our way of thinking is one of the causes of the violence that we're hearing about and seeing. You know, the man is taught to man up and be a man and be dominant and exert that control by any means.
Right.
And
so then, if abuse is so, for lack of a better word, entrenched in how we socialize young people, should we have any hope that abuse in this country will ever come to an end?
Actually, I do think that we should have that hope, because I think that abuse...
Is that hope valuable? Is it honest, rather?
Well,
is that hope honest?
To put it in another perspective, there's no country in the world where abuse has been completely eliminated. And so if we were to say on a whole this idea that we could reduce abuse completely, this hasn't been evidenced for yet. So it's not to say that it can't happen, it's just that we have yet to reach the state as a human race, you know, where this is something we have dealt with. There's no one country where there's zero rate for this. So, but what I can say is we could probably bring it down to a level where we are at an international standard, if you wish to call it that, where our rates are no greater or lesser than other countries in similar circumstances to ours, or rather that they're at the minimum for what we can expect for a developing country or for a developed country, regardless. I think we can achieve that. You did mention a few issues, for example, with parenting and corporal punishment in particular. I think it's very interesting you mentioned that, because corporal punishment is somewhat outdated as an ideology. Somewhat outdated. I want to call it somewhat because there are quite a few countries that still engage in its practices, even modern ones, modernized ones, but it's becoming more and more obsolete. In other words, people are doing other practices to take its place.
That are working.
That are working, yes. And now, the thing is, what you end up having is a system in a corporal punishment system, or rather, let me go back to the family, because I think this is easier to empathize with, is with an authoritarian family. And an authoritarian family is a family where the father or mother, both parents, are very, very demanding of the child, but show relatively little love. So it's all rules, no fun, no games, you know, and there's this sense of love from parents, but the love is detached. It's not as though the parents are actively like supporting or whatnot the kids. It's like, no, don't do this, don't do that, don't do this, don't do that. Follow the rules and everything's going to be fine. You don't follow the rules, you get a cut tail. Yeah. You get a licks and you gotta go home. Yeah. It's authoritarian parenting. And what happens is this is a game in a sense. Now, I don't like referring it to like, because people don't, it's not a game, it's not like a video game. Right. You can't play this game like that. It's not that kind of a game, but it's an interaction dynamic. And well, what it has is it creates this power response. You know, you have somebody who's clearly in a bigger position of power than you, telling you what to do, and your only option is to conform, right? And this is, I don't think this is healthy to have for very long periods of time. I think it's fine for children, because this is actually often how they can learn in these settings. Children can learn actually quite well in these settings, but once they hit that age of reason, you know, they get past, I think it's about 14, 15, 16, and they start to identify with themselves and they start to form their own beliefs. That's when I think you have to open the grounds for negotiation. Now, this is important in Trinidad for one reason, is that we actually have a lot of families where the children do not leave the family at 18. Like in the United States, families leave, as they hit 18, they're gone, they don't come back.
Because you go to university and you spend time.
In Trinidad, people stay till they're 30, as late as 30.
Yeah. And many reasons.
Even sometimes even later.
Right.
So the question then is, you know, how long should you be authoritarian if you are in your practice? You know, when is the time to open up the gates of reason to your child? If you're talking to parents in this case, you know, when is the time to open the gates?
And you think that this is directly connected to, our gender-based violence reality here? I think
it's definitely gender-based, in particular with how we form these submissive women. Now, I won't obviously mention any names, but I do know people who are very, very controlling parents, even though they're 22, 23, 24, and they have no reason to be controlling. I'm talking absolutely ridiculous constraints about their mobility.
And their kids are 20-something.
And their kids are 20-something, yes. And to me, and what ends up happening is the person is very scared of making risks, small risks, because the parents are entrenched that every little situation, you know, has a catastrophic failure point. We won't allow you to do it.
Right.
You know, and so.
So in the same way, you think that we're raising people who are more accepting of abuse to some degree?
Well, I think that these two are not separate issues.
Right.
That issue of raising people extremely strictly in this manner, you know, and raising people. Because when you have somebody who is so dependent on family like that, and if they were to find somebody who is in any way controlling, or takes all of the risk out of their life in that sense, because that's what controlling people do to a large degree. You don't have to make decisions for yourself. So you have this other person to make a decision for you. This is why I want to bring in later this issue of agreement, because I think that's an important aspect to consider whether or not this is abusive or not. But when these very controlling people, they might engage in the abusive behaviors more, but somebody might say agree to that behavior set. Now, whether or not this person will seek out an abusive person, I can't say for sure. I think that might depend on the context that individual person's raising and whatnot, but there's no doubt that the behaviors are linked in some way. I believe.
Okay, cool. So I want to, we have to take a short break, but before I go, I think it's really important at this point that we share some information with folks. If you or someone that you know is suffering from abuse or gender-based violence, there are folks that you can reach out to. You can call it domestic violence hotline. That's 800-SAVE. That's 800-7283. It's a 24-hour hotline, so you can call at any point in time and try to get the help that you need. There's also rape crisis hotline. There's a Port of Spain number and a San Fernando number. In Port of Spain, the number is 627-7273, and San Fernando is 657-5355. If you or someone that you know is suffering from abuse, the time to act is now. Don't save for tomorrow what you can do today, because it might mean someone's life. And we're going to talk about that in the next segment, about what the numbers of abuse in this country are. Do we have any research? So we'll be back right after this. You're watching New Talk. Stay tuned.